Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Well, Tony, I didn't think about really what I threw on this morning, and here I am wearing a Mets jacket right after they get swept by the Braves. So, Tony, instead of that, let's talk about another team that wears blue. Let's talk about the Michigan Wolverines instead. I don't want to talk about baseball right now.
Yes, let's talk about Michigan and also the Mets of college football, the Iowa Hawkeye offense. Michigan wins 27-14 over Iowa in Iowa City. So it was a good win for them. And of course, this is our Michigan Monday episode of the Buckeye Weekly Podcast as we look over this Michigan game and see how it applies to the Ohio State game coming up and the Buckeyes offensively and defensively. And Tom, and as you said before we just hit record, how exactly does this compare with what we will see down the road?
Yeah, it feels like there's a lot we can learn from how Michigan handled the Iowa offense, which has so much in common with the Ohio State offense, such as 11 players on the field at a time. And sometimes there's a football moving. Sometimes. Other than that, this is, I think, a game where you can learn a lot about Michigan, not necessarily as far as the defense applies to the Ohio State offense. This is a game that I think you go in with the idea that, Michigan probably sort of knows the score, both literally and figuratively here, where once you're up by a couple points, you've got a couple scores on the board, you're probably doing just fine, and you can probably throttle it back a little bit on offense and just don't do anything stupid, and you're going to win the game. That's essentially what they did. I think people are going to look at the 27-14 final score and say, wow, that's not that many points, and not realize that with 2 minutes left, the score was 20-7. And, that I think is more reflective of the game, which was Michigan completely controlled the first half of the game and then just held, put their hand on Iowa's forehead and held them far enough away that Iowa could swing as much as they wanted to and not ever hit Michigan. And that was basically the second half of the game.
Iowa threw for 246 yards. That is the third most for the Hawkeyes since, over the last 3 years. So good job. Good for them. They also happen to rush for 35 yards, which might be a season high. I'm not sure. This is a very, very bad Iowa offense, and we saw that. And quarterback Spencer Petras, this is one of those guys where I try not to be too critical because he's a college kid, so it's just best not to speak too much of him because there are some really bad throws in this game, and there's a 4th and 2 in particular down in the red zone where Spencer Petras rolls out and throws it. It would have been a yard short, and it was not caught anyway, I think. And that's just indicative of the Iowa offense where you only need 2 yards, but the longest they can run is 1 yard. And then you got to hope somebody can make a play. And really, the best playmakers on this team are the tight end Sam Laporta and Luke Lachey. And those two guys had a pretty decent day. But overall, there's just this Iowa offense. It's very predictable. It's very basic. And you just feel bad for some of these guys that are in it because it's not built for success. And Michigan took advantage of it.
Right. Yeah. That play, it was a 4th and 2. Well, first of all, they had 3rd and 4. This is kind of middle of the fourth quarter. It's 20-7 right now. Iowa has scored a touchdown to cut it from 20-0 to 27. They've gotten the ball back. They've marched down inside the 10-yard line of Michigan. They've got 3rd and 4. Just run it kind of between the tackles. It's 4th and 2. They roll out Spencer Petras. Not only does he throw it short of the sticks, not only is the throw well behind the receiver, so that's probably the receiver was a yard behind the sticks and the throw was about 1.5 yards behind the sticks. Not only was the pass incompleted, not only did the receiver have to dive where even if he had caught the pass, he would have been short and had no chance to move it forward. They also got called for offensive pass interference on the play. The Brian Ferentz era, everyone. Let's not be mean to the college kids, but the just spectacular fail sons who would be working the overnight shift at an adult movie theater at this point if their daddy wasn't the head coach. Holy Moses. I would like Brian Ferentz to get a job somewhere else in college football this offseason and let's see what he can get if daddy's not the one hiring him. because I suspect it's not Power 5 offensive coordinator. I suspect, Tony, that is not where he would end up. But yes, this was, and you mentioned Spencer Petras had 246 yards passing. There is a yeah but there. A lot of that came in the fourth quarter when the game was already decided, and Michigan was kind of backing out of things, giving them a little more space. He did make a couple nice throws. He had a really nice one down the seam to Luke Lachey at one point. But first half, he was 6 of 10 for 68 yards. That's much more representative of what that day was for him. The fourth quarter, they put up some bigger numbers. If I can find the fourth quarter stats, here it is. Spencer Petras, no, I cannot find the fourth quarter stats. It doesn't matter, Tony. He did most of his damage in the second half when Michigan was sort of ahead by enough that you weren't really concerned. The tight ends, to your point, the tight ends were really good. They had Sam Laporta was the leading receiver in terms of number of receptions, anyway, with five catches for 24 yards. That's your leading receiver, 5 catches for 24 yards. Luke Lachey, 4 catches for 84. He's kind of their big play tight end. Nico Raggiani, is he? Did they consider him a fullback? Did they consider him a tight end? I mean, is he? I don't know exactly how they classify him, but yeah, I mean, 4 catches, 50. Is he a receiver? I mean, he's kind of a blocky receiver. They just don't. There is no big playability there really in that offense at all. And then anytime Iowa actually did something, they were just constantly shooting themselves in the foot. They had 2 long gains on one drive, like a 15 and a 17-yard play, wiped out by a holding penalty, a clipping penalty. They got a stop on a stop on a 2nd and 17 on, I think, the ensuing Michigan drive, and then there was a pass interference penalty. They were just constantly shooting themselves in the foot. It was just, the Iowa fans. The Iowa fan base is an extremely dedicated fan base, very loyal. They were booing very, very consistently throughout the game, and man, Iowa deserved it. That was just the coaching staff there. I cannot fathom the Gary Barta to Kirk Ferentz line of leadership there, where it's just like this. This is fine. Just keep running this back over and over and over again, and it's going to be fine. Like, have some respect for yourself, Iowa. You could do better than this.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see the kind of pressure that is put on Ferentz to make some sort of a move. Now that you've seen Wisconsin fire their head coach, you've seen Nebraska fire their head coach. Like, the rest of the division is trying to do something, and Iowa is doing nothing. Spencer Petras in the fourth quarter, 11 of 14 for 122 yards with a touchdown. He was sacked twice. That's also when the Michigan defense was able to know what was coming, and they were able to get after him more. And that's when I think they sacked him 3 times in the game, and 2 of them came when they knew that he was throwing the ball. So, it was a soft defense at that point. And if Iowa's passing game is having success against you, it's because you're allowing it. So I'm not making too much of what they were doing there. So let's talk about the Michigan offense, because for me, that's the bigger story. And this is something where they were very under control. And that's what that's what I was wondering if we would see. And this is I think a muted J.J. McCarthy, which is perfectly fine. And that's okay on the road at Iowa. Just get in, get out, go home, and be 5-0. And they were. And they rushed for 172 yards. They threw for 155. So they ended up outgaining Iowa by about 46 yards. Not great. 327 total yards for the Wolverines. But again, it's a very good Iowa defense. You just don't want to make any mistakes and give the Iowa offense a short field, because that's really the only way that you're going to lose this. And so you see Blake Corum with 29 carries for 133 yards. Donovan Edwards was back, carried it 5 times for 29 yards. Also had 4 catches, I think. Yeah, 4 for 21, including a touchdown on a tremendous scramble and throw by J.J. McCarthy. But McCarthy, I thought, 18 of 24, 155 yards, 1 touchdown. He was sacked once. He fumbled on a backwards throw, essentially, as he's getting hit. So, again, he put the ball on the ground again. I'm going to have to go through and chart how many times he's done that in his career, because it's a sizable number for his number of snaps. But I was impressed with the running game to do what they did. And, the Blake Corum, the long of 20 yards. So it's like he didn't have necessarily that breakout until the very end when he was able to get out there, but solid effort by him. Comfortable and under control by J.J. McCarthy, which is exactly what they wanted. So I thought it was a well prepared game plan. And that first series, they were running some tempo and they knew what they were going to do, so they could. And I thought they went down and scored a touchdown. And then after that, it gets a little bit slower. And I'm just throwing all of the offensive stuff out here for you, Tom. And then only one drive in the second half for Michigan's offense of more than 3 plays, which, two of the first one, it was like a 10-play touchdown drive. And one of the last ones was like a 3-play touchdown drive after a failed 4th down attempt for Iowa. So a lot to like, but only one drive in the second half of 3 plays or more is, it's a little concerning. But again, you're just trying to run out the clock at that point.
Yeah, I think you have to look at the first half stats, and rather than look at total yards for the games, here's the stats that I took away from halftime. Michigan was leading 13-0. They got it to 20-0 right after halftime. And at that point, if you're up 20 points on Iowa, you can give Iowa 16 quarters and they're not going to get to 20 points. So the other thing in the first half that I thought really encapsulated the Michigan's dominance of the first half in a way that the score really didn't. Number of first downs in the first half: Michigan 18, Iowa 5. That kind of encapsulated it to me, because Michigan was they were very efficient. I think they weren't particularly explosive. They were just very efficient. It was J.J. McCarthy for the most part, like 90-something% of the time, taking what was there. There were a couple times that it was just like, oh, nope, there it is again. That's not what you want to do. Just putting the ball at risk at a time when you don't need to put the ball at risk. But for the most part, it was very efficient. Blake Corum, he didn't have a monster game. He averaged 4.6 yards a carry, but it just felt like every time they needed him. There was one time he got stuffed early in sometime in the second half, or got stuffed on a 3rd and 1. And other than that, it was just Blake Corum just keeps his legs churning, and it's 3rd and 2 and he picks up 3. It's 3rd and 4 and he picks up 5. It's 2nd and 5 and he picks up 6. It just constantly was just kind of keeping the chains moving. Their drives in the first 5 drives of the game, 11 plays, 75 yards, touchdown. 8 plays, 35 yards, they ended up punting. 13 plays, 54 yards, field goal. 13 plays, 61 yards, field goal. 10 plays, 67 yards, touchdown. Like that is Iowa-ing Iowa right back to Iowa. That is just, you like it, do you? Okay, let's see how you like it when we do it to you. Just grinding it out, keeping the chains moving. Nothing fancy, nothing explosive. I'm sure, whatever the post-game highlights were just really dull. But, it was just, you just saw Michigan just kind of handling their business. And the second touchdown, the one in the early of the third quarter, that was kind of the one sort of like highlight play to me, where McCarthy, there's a linebacker blitzing off the edge, and McCarthy gets around him, uses his leg, gets around him, gets out into space, buys time, kind of rolling out towards the sideline, and then finds a wide open guy in the back of the end zone. That was the one where it was like, that's the 5-star J.J. McCarthy. But you also had a couple where it was right before halftime, they're up 10-0, they're in field goal range. I think it was a 3rd down, and he threw one off his back foot to a guy who was covered in the back of the end zone. And he did the same thing against Maryland last week, like right before halftime, and threw one where it was like, I don't think Maryland picked it off last week. I think they just had a chance to potentially pick it off. But you're taking chances right before halftime. You don't need to take, just if it's not there, throw it away, kick the field goal. You're right in field goal range. I think the ball was even centered. Jake Moody is going to make it from there. Just take the points, recognize the game situation. The other one was the one you mentioned. I think it was the only sack of the game where it was categorized as a sack. He was, rolling right and trying to throw the ball, and there was a guy right in his face, and he got his arm swatted. The ball flies backwards, and they took a 20-something yard loss on the play. That's one where it's like, you're up 20-0. It's the third quarter. Just eat it. There's been no indication from Iowa that they're going to be able to do anything here to threaten you. Just eat it and live to fight another day. And he instead tries to do a little too much, gets it knocked out. Then they lost 20-something yards. That was the one where, then they had a bad punt from Brad Robbins. And then Iowa only had a 44-yard touchdown drive. That was the first Iowa touchdown drive. That bad decision set that up. So, you're still seeing a little bit of the young gunslinger, J.J. McCarthy. I mean, there's a little, remember Drew Tate for Iowa, where Drew Tate would sometimes like run around and make these incredible plays. And it was like, how did he do that? And then sometimes he would run around and make these incredibly stupid plays. And it was like, why did he do that? There was just watching J.J. McCarthy play at Iowa. There's just a little Drew Tate there. I think the ceiling is quite a bit higher for J.J. McCarthy than it was for Drew Tate. But, you know, every week with Drew Tate, it feels like, or I'm sorry, with J.J. McCarthy, there we go. Now I've really confused them. We'll be calling him Drew Tate for the rest of the year. Now, you know, every week it feels like we watch J.J. McCarthy, and there's like the percentage of good J.J. McCarthy plays seems like it's sort of slowly ticking up, but there's still just enough like, oh, you're not going to be able to get away with that most of the season, that you get a little like, a little nervous. I did like the use, Tony, of Ronnie Bell in the run game. They only did it. I think they only had a couple plays to him, like the end around for the first touchdown, and then the kind of like long option where, you know, it's like a speed option, but J.J. McCarthy actually throws the ball out to Ronnie Bell. You know, I think they only did it twice, but I like that as a little bit of a change up for their offense.
When you have receivers like that and you're not going to be throwing the ball a bunch, I love getting them involved in the running game. And you know, that's one of the things where we've been maybe expecting AJ Henning to be a jet sweep guy. You know, that's what their slot receivers are mostly. Haven't really seen him do any of that, but I'm all for getting Ronnie Bell the ball however you can in any ways, because just throwing it to him, it's almost not enough with as little as this team is throwing. And this is a very talented receiver, talented playmaker. And if he's only getting 4 targets a game and catching 3 of them, you're kind of wasting him a little bit. And I think they knew going in, this is going to be a very conservative offensive attack and perhaps not a lot of possessions. And so let's try to get him involved as much as possible, any way possible. And yeah, that end around touchdown run was obviously caught Iowa off guard, and it was a good start. And that was something, I assume this was a scripted series because it was the first drive, and they were clicking really well. And like I said, they were speeding it up. And I've talked about this before when I write Michigan Monday and I rewatched the game on YouTube. Like, you can fast forward and rewind with the J is rewind and the L key on your keyboard is fast forward, and it fast forwards 10 seconds or rewinds 10 seconds. And after a play, I can hit L to fast forward 3 times for 30 seconds, and then Michigan is getting set for the play. This time it was 2 times. Like, you could only go 20 seconds ahead, and then there's still like 15 or 20 seconds on the clock as they're snapping it. That's one way I can tell internally, are they speeding things up because I have to slow what I'm doing down. And they were doing that the first drive, not so much throughout the rest of the game, but they have that capability, I think, as long as they plan for it. Towards, I think it's maybe the fourth quarter, the second half, is either the play-by-play guy or the color commentator talking about how, you know, Iowa mounting this comeback, needing to do whatever they can. The quote was, "This is kitchen sink time for the Iowa offense." And I think you saw the kitchen sink from the Iowa offense. There is no kitchen sink, as I wrote down here. The Iowa offense bathes in a pond. They don't have sinks. They don't have anything. They're pond people. And there's no kitchen sink to go to, because it's the Ned Flanders beat Nick Parents. We've tried nothing and we're all out of ideas. And so there was only so much they could do. And obviously Michigan knows this, and it's not unlike Ohio State against Rutgers. Ohio State knows Rutgers can only do so much. Michigan knows that Iowa can only do so much. So I thought it was a very boring game plan, but who cares? Like, you just, when you look at that schedule, when we looked at that schedule before the season at Iowa, watch out. That could be a loss. That could be your first loss of the season. And you go in there and really it's never in doubt, and you'll take that 100 out of 100 times. I don't care how upset people are, maybe Michigan fans are, that it wasn't as pretty as they wanted. We can tell you from experience, it's better to win ugly than lose even uglier.
Well, and that wasn't even really an ugly an ugly win. They were just kind of in control the whole time. It was a boring win, but I don't think it was an ugly win. They did what they needed to do. That was not, this was not a Jim Tressel 10-6 kind of game, or, we've seen Iowa play a 6-4 game before. We've seen, what was the one earlier this year? Didn't they have a 10-7 game or something like that? you've seen really, really bad, ugly Iowa games. This was a better team going in there and just sort of strangling the life out of them in the first 35 minutes of the game, and then just sort of putting it in neutral the rest of the way. Because you get to a certain point and you can keep trying to put up numbers and whatever. Iowa does a very good job of keeping everything in front of them and making you methodically march the ball down the field. And, the whole point of that is if you're not a very good offense or you're not an efficient offense, you're not going to be able to execute consistently enough to keep the ball moving down the field, keep the chains moving. Michigan was able to consistently execute and move the ball down the field. That is a good thing. You are not going to, this is a little like playing Northwestern. It's it's like half of the Big Ten West is like this, where the defense is just going to, the defense is built to stop Big Ten West teams, which means crappy offenses. So they're going to don't give up big plays and just trust that the other team is going to screw up at some point enough that they will be off the field. Well, Michigan, we set 11 plays, 8 plays, 13 plays, 13 plays, 10 plays. Like I said, first 5 drives of the game, they kept the ball moving down the field, scored on 4 of those 5 drives. Yeah, you'd like more than 2 touchdowns, sure, but did you need more than 2 touchdowns? No, you did not. I said to you, it must have been during our pregame show. Michigan was up 10-0. It was like, well, that game's over. Like I was not putting up 10 points if Michigan is going to actively try to stop them. And they didn't. They had 7 points at the point where, in the final minute of the game, and then they kind of went down the field against a prevent defense and scored again. I think the thing to me that maybe was the biggest takeaway is, other than crappy offense, Iowa is known maybe most for just being very good in the trenches and having a good offensive line, a good defensive line. Michigan really controlled the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. They were able to run the ball. Again, it was not a bunch of explosive 70-yard runs, anything like that. But they were just able to consistently just get enough push, open up enough holes. Blake Corum does a very good job of finding the holes, even if it's not where the play is originally designed to go. They get a crease. He kind of shoots through it. And, you pick up another 5 yards and the chains move again. They were very efficient on offense. The offensive line did a very nice job. This is about as dominant a game as I've seen the Michigan defensive line have, where Iowa just didn't run the ball for anything. 24 carries for 35 yards. And yeah, they had 31 yards of sack on there, but the 2 running backs, 4.2 yards per carry, 2.7 yards per carry, just nothing. There was just nothing there. Long of 12 yards on the day for Iowa on the ground. And they had 4 sacks, I think, of Petrus, and a couple of them were late, but Taylor Upshaw had there was a screen pass on a 3rd down. It was like a 3rd and 12. That might have been in the 3rd quarter. But, there was just a screen pass, and Taylor Upshaw just read the thing just from the start. Really, really smart play, just a good play there. But it was, not just one guy. It was not last year. It was just like Aiden Hutchinson had 4 sacks. I think they had 4 guys with sacks, who got on the stat sheet for sacks this week. Mike Morris, 2 sacks, 3 tackles. It feels like that was maybe the most impressed I've been with the Michigan defensive line all season.
Yeah, you saw freshman Mason Graham get in there on a bull rush. Taylor Upshaw, as you said, has incredible blowing up a screen, coming from the opposite side of the line, running down the line and blowing it up. The recognition there was impressive. I would agree with that. I was a little disappointed. This is my first time watching Iowa punter Tory Taylor. He only punted 5 times. The box score says none of those went inside the 20. One of them did, though. It landed at the 9, and it was returned a little bit. But still, I was expecting more punts inside the 20. He had a touchback. Let's slow down on this Heisman campaign. If the dude is only, 1 touchback and 5 punts and 1 inside the 20, he was outplayed by Brad Robbins, I think, in this one with 2 punts inside the 20. And really, if Tory Taylor isn't pinning an offense, then Iowa does not have much hope against a team that has some capability of scoring as Michigan does. But overall, like I said, just a very workmanlike, if you will, outing on offense. And defensively, like you said, defensive line controlled it. Mike Morris getting after it again. Like he may have had 1 or 2 sacks last week. I know he had at least 1, another 2 this week. Let's see how he continues on and see that this isn't just a hot streak or something like that. Let's see some consistency out of this defensive line and see how that builds. But Overall, not unlike what we expected, I think, where it's just like, it's going to be, as you said, arm's length, get up early, then you can kind of, just pack it in a little bit, try not to give up any big plays, which they didn't really. Like you said, there's some stuff down the seam to the tight ends, but overall, exactly what I think Jim Harbaugh dialed up, so props to him on this one. Any other thoughts about this one?
Yeah, I think there's some question about the utility of this game in terms of, deciding what Michigan's defense is going to look like against Ohio State, because it's pretty much a polar opposite offense. But, I think we still have not seen. I think the Maryland game is starting to look like it was maybe a better win than we thought at the time. Maryland kind of they just stomped Michigan State. So, yeah, I mean, Maryland is probably the best team they've played. Iowa's, if not, and then it's Iowa. You're still early enough in the schedule where you don't quite know what you got with Michigan just because their non-conference schedule is so bad. But I think we're starting to get to the point where, if this was going to be a very good Michigan team, if this was going to be a Michigan team that really did live up to that, number 4 kind of ranking, this is a lot like what that would look like, where they're sort of just handling their business. And, you're going to, if they can play like they did on Saturday, they are going to come into Columbus at 11-0. And then, you find out, because I think Ohio State presents a different type of challenge than most of the rest of the Big Ten this year. I don't think that's too hot of a take for our viewers up in Ann Arbor. But yeah, I think it feels like this is a Michigan team that's just sort of like handling its business and on to the next one right now, which is with the types of teams they've been playing. That's what all you need to do.
Looking at just Big Ten only games right now, Ohio State leading the conference in scoring at 50.5. Michigan is in third place, 20 points behind the Buckeyes at 30.5 points per game. The number 2 scoring team in the Big Ten in conference play, as everybody knows and as they have expected, the Nebraska Cornhuskers at 31.5 points per game. It's pretty sad that there's only 3 teams scoring over 30 points a game in Big Ten play. But there are many in between in the 20s. So good job, all of you guys. Of course, Michigan State and Rutgers, 10 points a game in conference play. That's the Buckeyes' next 2 opponents. Rutgers last week, Michigan State this week. Anything else, Tom, before we get out of here?
No, I think we've heard quite enough about the rest of the Big Ten. Let's stop talking right now, please.
Yeah. And again, this is a couple of weeks in a row where I've had to watch Iowa for the Rutgers game that they just played, and then watch Iowa for the Michigan game. I'm through with Iowa. I won't watch it again, even for the upcoming Ohio State game. I've seen enough, and I know we've said enough, but we'll say more about Iowa coming down here in a couple of weeks. But that will do it for today. I want to thank you all for joining us. Again, check us out at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Become a member. We'd love to see you there. Check us out on YouTube at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. Go ahead and subscribe there. Hit the bell to be notified. Do all of that. We appreciate it. So that will do it. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you later.